Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was hunted by every villain. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sky over Muzidafu was a piercing, cloudless blue, the kind of aggressive clarity that usually promised a good day. Inside the prestigious walls of UA, High Class 1A was vibrating with the peculiar, chaotic energy of a Tuesday afternoon. The grand windows of the classroom were thrown open to catch the breeze, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms and the distant, urban hum of the city. Cementas had just finished a particularly dry lecture on the structural integrity of public infrastructure during high-impact quirk usage, and the transition period to the next class was in full swing. I'm just saying, Kaminari Denki said, leaning his chair back until it balanced precariously on two legs, if I had a quirk that could manipulate cheese, I'd be the richest guy in France. Forget hero work. I'd be a tycoon. A cheese tycoon. Jiro Kyoka rolled her earphone jacks, not bothering to look up from her phone. That is the stupidest thing I've heard all week. And I listen to my Netta breathe every day. Hey! My Netta squeaked from 3 desks away. Izuku Midoriya sat at his desk, the familiar scratch of his pen against paper serving as a grounding rhythm. He was muttering, a low, rapid-fire stream of consciousness that had long since become background noise to his classmates. He was analyzing the morning's practical exercise, dissecting the vector angles of Ciro's tape in relation to Bakugo's explosive maneuvering. If Kaken increases his ignition temperature by 2 degrees, the recoil would require a shifted center of gravity, but that risks rotator cuff strain unless he modifies his gauntlets. Deku, you're doing it again, Irarika Ochako said softly, leaning over his desk. Her smile was bright, the kind that always made the knot of anxiety in Izuku's chest loosen just a fraction. You're going to burn a hole through that notebook. Izuku snapped his head up, his face flushing a brilliant red. He slammed the notebook shut. Sorry, Uraraka-san. I was just, the physics of this sorry. Don't apologize, nerd, Bakugo Katsuki grunted from the desk in front, his feet propped up on the wood. He didn't turn around, but the menace was palpable. Just shut up. Some of us are trying to enjoy the silence before Aizawa rolls in here like a caterpillar from hell. Ida Tenya chopped the air with a robotic precision. Bakugo. Disrespecting the furniture is a violation of School Code 3B. And speaking ill of our homeroom teacher is highly unbecoming of a hero in training. Shut it, Four Eyes. It was normal. It was beautifully, painfully normal. It was the kind of atmosphere Izuku had fought, bled, and broken his bones to protect. The safety of the classroom felt like a warm blanket, a sanctuary separated from the League of Villains, the Nomus, and the looming shadow of the paranormal liberation fronts. Then, the world hiccuped. It started with a sound. Not an explosion, or a scream, but a high-pitched, digital screech. It was the sound of 1,000 distinct frequencies being forced into alignment against their will. Every student flinched. Jiro screamed, clapping her hands over her ears, her sensitive jacks vibrating violently. What the hell is that? Kirishima yelled, jumping to his feet, his skin hardening instinctively. The lights in the classroom flickered, once, twice, and then blew out with a synchronized pop, raining fine glass dust onto the floor. But the room didn't go dark. The smart board at the front of the room, which had been in sleep mode, roared to life. It didn't boot up with the UA logo. It ignited with a static white noise that was so bright it hurt to look at. Simultaneously, every phone in the room lit up. Kaminari's pocket buzzed. Urarika's phone on the desk lit up. Ida, Bakugo, Tokoemi. 20 screens in the room instantly synchronized. Izuku felt a cold dread wash over him. It was a sensation he had felt before, a phantom itch beneath his skin, the danger sense within one for all flaring not with a sharp stab, but with a dull, suffocating pressure. Something is wrong. Something is here. Is this a drill? Azuritsuya asked, her voice trembling slightly. The door to the classroom slammed open. Aizawa Shoda stood there, his capture weapon already floating around his neck, his eyes glowing red. He wasn't looking at the students. He was looking at the smart board. Everyone, get down, Aizawa ordered. His voice was calm, but it was the calmness of a man holding back a landslide. Don't look at the screens. But it was too late. The static on the smartboard coalesced. It twisted and warped, black pixels devouring the white, until an image formed. It wasn't just the smartboard. It was every phone. Every tablet. Through the open window, the massive digital billboard on the side of a shopping center 3 miles away flickered and changed. The sound of confused shouting rose from the streets below. The image sharpened. It was a man in a pristine black suit. His face was a ruin of scar tissue, devoid of eyes or a nose, dominated by a breathing apparatus that hissed with a mechanical, rhythmic menace. He sat upon a throne of medical tubing and dark metal, exuding an aura of terrifying elegance. All for one. The air in the classroom vanished. Bakugo went rigid, his hands smoking slightly. Izuku felt his heart hammer against his ribs so hard he thought it might crack them. "This is a pre-recorded loop," Aizawa said, reaching for his own phone to crush it, but he stopped. The voice that emanated from the speakers wasn't looping. It was live, or it was timed so perfectly it felt live. "Greetings, children of a fragile society." All for One's voice was smooth, cultured, and resonated with a paternal warmth that made it infinitely more terrifying. It echoed from the smartboard, from the phones, and from the city outside. It was a surround sound nightmare. "I apologize for the interruption of your daily tedium. I imagine you are sitting in your classrooms, your offices, your homes, believing that the walls around you offer safety, believing that the heroes you worship have told you the truth." Izuku gripped his desk. His knuckles turned white. "He's talking to everyone. He hacked the whole country." The camera on the screen zoomed in slightly on All for One's featureless face. "But lies are a currency, and Japan is suffering from inflation. There is a rot at the heart of your hero's society. A thief. A boy who stole power that did not belong to him. A boy who masquerades as a savior while hoarding a curse that threatens to dismantle the very fabric of our world." Izuku stopped breathing. No. He wouldn't. All might fell because of this thief. All for One lied, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. The symbol of peace withered away because he was leached dry by a parasite. And now, that parasite hides within the walls of UA High, protected by teachers who are complicit in the deception. Aizawa moved. He ripped the power cord of the smartboard from the wall. Sparks flew. The screen didn't turn off. "It's not running on main power," Kaminari whispered, horrified. He's pushing the signal through the ambient electricity." "That's impossible." On the screen, an image appeared next to All for One. It was a photo. A high-resolution, candid shot of a boy with messy green hair, freckles, and a terrified expression. Izuku Midoriya. The classroom went deathly silent. 19 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Some were confused, some were terrified, but the sheer weight of the attention felt physical. Izuku Midoriya. All for One pronounced the name like a curse. Hero name Deku. The boy who holds the stolen power. The boy who will bring about the end of this country if he is allowed to remain free. Izuku couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He felt stripped naked, flayed open for the world to see. The secret he had guarded with his life, the secret All Might had entrusted to him, was being broadcast to millions. "I am a generous man," All for One continued, leaning forward. "I wish to restore order. I wish to reclaim what was stolen and prevent the catastrophe this boy represents. But I cannot enter the fortress of UA High alone. I need civic engagement." The screen shifted again. Large, bold red text appeared, overlaid on Izuku's face. "Bounty active. To the citizen, the villain, the hero, or the desperate soul who brings Izuku Midoriya to me," All for One said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a velvet promise. "I offer the following: 100 billion yen. Tax-free. Delivered in gold, cryptocurrency, or foreign assets." A collective gasp ripped through the room. 100 billion. It was an amount of money that didn't just change a life, it changed history. It could buy small countries. It could erase debt for generations. But All for One raised a finger. "Money is trivial. For those of you with greater ambition, for those of you who have been spurned by society, or limited by your biology, I offer something more." The camera focused intensely on the villain's scarred grin. "Bring me the boy, and I will grant you one wish. Do you desire a specific quirk? I have thousands. Do you wish to be healed of a terminal illness? Do you wish for the power to topple a government? Do you wish to bring a loved one back from the brink of death? The silence in the room was shattered by the sound of heavy breathing. It wasn't just the students. The promise hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. I am all for one. And I keep my promises. The boy is at UA High. The gates are strong, but there are millions of you. And only one of him. The screen flickered. The hunt begins, now. The screens went black. For 3 seconds, absolute silence reigned. Then, the world outside UA screamed. It wasn't a scream of terror. It was a roar. It was the sound of millions of people reacting at once. The distant city noise, usually a hum, spiked into a cacophony of shouting, engines revving, and sirens wailing. Inside Class 1A, the tension snapped. Deku. Uraraka's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at him, her eyes wide, swimming with confusion and fear. What was that? Stolen power? All Might? It's a lie! Izuku shouted, standing up so fast his chair clattered backward. He was shaking. He's lying! I didn't steal it. All Might gave it to me. We know, shitty nerd! Bakugo barked, stepping between Izuku and the rest of the class. His palms were popping with small explosions. He faced the class, his expression ferocious. Don't you extras look at him like that. That potato-faced villain is trying to divide us. But the bounty, Mineta whimpered, hiding under his desk. 100 billion. And a wish? People kill for 1,000 yen. People are going to. Sensei. Ida turned to Aizawa. We need to secure the perimeter. If that broadcast went nationwide. Aizawa was already at the window, peering through the blinds. His face was paler than usual. It wasn't just nationwide, Ida, Aizawa said grimly. That signal hijacked military frequencies. That was global. Aizawa turned to face his students. Midoriya. Get your costume case. Now. Nobody leaves this room. I need to contact Principal Nizu. Sensei, Todoroki said, his voice cold and steady. He was standing by the other window. I don't think we have time for phone calls. What do you mean? Look! The class rushed to the windows. UA High sat upon a hill, a fortress of heroism. Usually, the gates were manned by the press, a gaggle of 30 or 40 reporters. Now, the street leading to the main gate was black with people. They were running. It wasn't an organized army. It was a stampede. Civilians in business suits, construction workers still wearing hard hats, people in pajamas who had run out of their houses. Cars were being abandoned in the middle of the highway as drivers sprinted toward the school. And behind them, the shadows of the city were moving. There are so many, Momo Yayorozu whispered, her hand covering her mouth. They're not villains, Kirishima said, gripping the windowsill until the wood cracked. Those are regular people. Desperate people, Aizawa corrected, his scarf floating higher. Desperate people who just successfully were told that the cause of all their problems is sitting in this room, and that the solution is worth 100 billion yen. Down below, the first wave of the mob hit the UA barrier. Usually, the UA barrier was an impenetrable wall of steel and sensors. But it was designed to stop villains. It was designed to stop tactical intrusions. It wasn't designed to stop a human tsunami. Hundreds of people slammed against the heavy steel gates. Fists, quirks, and makeshift weapons battered the metal. Bam! 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 The sound echoed up the hill like a war drum. Let us in! A voice screamed from below, amplified by a megaphone. Give us the boy! Give us the thief! He's a monster! Another voice shrieked. He killed All Might. Izuku stepped back from the window, his breath hitching in his throat. He felt like he was drowning. The accusations were irrational, insane even, but the sheer volume of hatred directed at him was a physical weight. I have to go, Izuku stammered. I can't stay here. If they break in. Shut up. Bakugo grabbed Izuku by the collar. You walk out there, you die. Look at them, Deku. They'll tear you apart before you get 10 feet, but if I stay, they'll tear the school apart. Izuku yelled back, tears pricking his eyes. Everyone is in danger because of me. Problem child, sit down. Aizawa's voice was a whip crack. He activated his quirk, his hair rising, erasing the quirks of the students to force their attention. We are heroes. We do not sacrifice students to the mob. UA is the safest place in Japan. The security systems are engaging. As if on cue, the ground around the school gates rumbled. The UA security robots, huge, towering machines, deployed from their bunkers. Please disperse. The automated voice of a three-pointer robot boomed. This is a restricted area. Lethal force is authorized for villainous acts. We aren't villains. A man in a tattered coat screamed, his hand transforming into a jagged blade. We're taking back our country. He lunged at the robot. The robot hesitated. Its programming was strict: protect students, neutralize villains. But these were civilians. The hesitation was fatal. A blast of fire from the crowd, someone with a strong pyrokinesis quirk, engulfed the robot's sensors. Another person, a woman with a gigantification quirk, grew to 20 feet tall and tackled the machine, driving it into the ground. The mob cheered. It was a bloodthirsty, terrifying sound. They're destroying the bots, Ciro said, disbelief coloring his voice. Those are zero-pointers getting wrecked. It's the numbers, Midoriya muttered, his analyzer brain working despite his panic. The bots can't target everyone. If they fire, they cause mass casualties. AFO knew this. He weaponized the civilians to disable the defenses so the real villains could get in. Real villains? Uraraka asked. Izuku pointed toward the back of the mob, where the chaos was more organized. Amidst the frantic civilians, dark shapes were moving with purpose. A plume of blue fire erupted in the distance. A wave of decay turned a street lamp to dust. The League, Todoroki said, ice beginning to creep up his right side. They're using the crowd as human shields. Suddenly, the PA's system crackled to life. Principal Nisa's voice echoed through the school, lacking its usual cheerful demeanor. It was clipped, fast, and serious. Code Black. Repeat, Code Black. This is not a drill. All students are to retreat to the dormitories immediately. The main campus is being locked down. Teachers, engage defensive protocols Omega. Do not engage civilians unless life is threatened. Priority 1 is the protection of Student 18, Midoriya Izuku. The gravity of Student 18 hit the class. He wasn't their friend right now. He was the objective. Come on. Aizawa kicked the door open. Move. Formation A. Midoriya in the center. Bakugo, Todoroki, Kirishima, on the flanks. Ida, rear guard. Go! Class 1A moved. They didn't hesitate. Despite the fear, despite the confusion, the months of hellish training kicked in. They formed a diamond formation around Izuku. They burst into the hallway, joining the flood of students from other classes. It's him! A student from the General Studies department pointed at Izuku as they ran past. It's Midoriya! The guy from the screens. The General Studies student took a step forward, a wild look in his eyes. Hey! Wait! Is it true? Did you steal it? Back off! Bakugo snarled, blasting an explosion near the student's feet. The boy scrambled back, terrified. Don't attack other students. Ida reprimanded, though he shoved another gawking student out of the way with his engine boost. They're looking at me like I'm a monster, Izuku whispered, his head down, running to keep up with his friends. You're a billion-yen lottery ticket, Tokoyami said grimly from his side, dark shadow flaring out to push people away. Greed turns men into monsters, Midoriya. Do not take it personally. They burst out of the main building and onto the walkway leading to the Heights Alliance dorms. The noise was deafening out here. The Yui barrier, a massive wall of hardened plates, was visible in the distance. It was groaning. Crack. A spiderweb fracture appeared in the sky. No, not the sky. The barrier. They're breaking through, Sato yelled. That wall can take a tank shell. They have a warp quirk, Aizawa shouted, looking back. Or a decay quirk. Keep moving! As they sprinted across the campus grounds, a shadow fell over them. Izuku looked up. Hovering above the UA grounds was not a helicopter, but a man. He was suspended in the air by magnetic discs. He wore a mercenary's tactical gear, and he was holding a high-powered rifle trained directly on the group. Target sighted, the mercenary's voice boomed from a loudspeaker on his belt. Delivery alive preferred. Leg shots authorized. Get down! Aizawa launched his capture tape, snagging Izuku and yanking him to the ground just as a bullet tore through the space where his head had been. The bullet impacted the concrete, exploding with a concussive force that threw Uraraka and Ishido backward. "Sniper!" Hagakure screamed. "I got him!" Bakugo launched himself into the air, spinning like a torpedo. Howitzer impact. The explosion engulfed the mercenary, sending him spiraling away, but 3 more figures leaped over the perimeter wall. They weren't civilians. These were pros. Villains who knew how to fight. One landed on the path in front of them, a hulking beast with skin like rhino hide. Another, a slender woman with blades for fingers, landed on the left. "Hand him over, Eraserhead," the rhino man grunted, cracking his knuckles. "We don't want to kill kids. We just want the payday." Aizawa stood up, his eyes glowing red, his hair floating. He looked exhausted, but his grin was terrifying. "You want my student?" Aizawa drew a knife. "You'll have to get through me, and then you'll have to get through the most stubborn class in UA history." Class 1A rallied. Todoroki stomped, sending a glacier of ice toward the rhino. Kirishima hardened and charged, but Izuku stayed on the ground for a moment. He looked at the chaos. He saw the cracks spreading in the barrier. He saw the smoke rising from the city. He felt the vibration of thousands of footsteps shaking the earth. 100 billion yen, one wish. He looked at his hands. The scars of One for All were etched into his skin. All Might had entrusted him with this power to save the world. But looking at the faces of his friends, Bakugo screaming as he fought, Uraraka dusting herself off to join the fray, Aizawa putting his body between the villains and the class, Izuku realized the terrible truth AFO had orchestrated. As long as he was here, the world would come for him. And to get to him, the world would burn UA to the ground. The hunt had begun. And UA was no longer a fortress. It was a cage. Izuku stood up, green lightning flickering around his body. "Deku?" Uraraka called out, sensing the shift in his energy. "I'm okay," Izuku lied. He charged up 20% full cowling. The golden ticket had been punched. And the ride was going to be a nightmare. "Let's fight," Izuku said, though his eyes were fixed not on the villains in front of them, but on the broken horizon beyond the gates. "We have to hold them back. For now," he thought. Just for now. Because deep down, amidst the roar of the crowd and the crackle of quirks, Izuku Midoriya was already doing the math. And the equation only had one solution where his friends survived. He had to run. The alarm was no longer a sound. It was a physical vibration that rattled the teeth of everyone inside the UA campus. It was a rhythmic, blaring heartbeat of emergency that drowned out thought, leaving only instinct. Outside the main gate, the world had gone mad. It was a Tuesday afternoon, usually reserved for hero basic training and English lectures. Now, the sky was choked with smoke, and the reinforced steel of the UA barrier, the walls designed to withstand tank fire and villainous quirks, was groaning under the weight of 10,000 fists. Hisashi Yamada, the pro-hero present Mike, stood atop the guard wall, his signature sunglasses cracked, his leather jacket torn at the shoulder. He looked down at the sea of humanity crashing against the gates and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Usually, villains were easy to spot. They wore costumes. They had a look, a mania, a desire for destruction. But the mob below was terrifyingly mundane. He saw a man in a business suit, tie flapping in the wind, using a telekinetic quirk to hurl chunks of pavement at the gate. He saw a woman in a convenience store apron, her eyes wild with greed, spitting acid at the hinges. He saw teenagers, barely older than his students, filming the assault on their phones while cheering on a mutant-type villain battering the steel with sledgehammer hands. "Return to your homes!" Mike screamed, amplifying his voice with his quirk voice. The sound wave hit the front row of the mob like a physical wall, knocking 50 people off their feet. "This is a federal facility. Lethal force is authorized. Do not make us do this. Give us the boy." The crowd roared back, a discordant symphony of greed. 100 billion! Someone screamed. "He's just one kid. Give him up." Beside Mike, Midnight cracked her whip, releasing a plume of somnambulist aroma. It drifted down, knocking out a pocket of attackers, but the wind was gusting, dispersing the gas too quickly. "It's no use," Hisashi Midnight said, her voice tight with strain. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, likely from a thrown rock. There are too many of them. The gas is just making them angrier. They think we're hoarding the wealth. They think we're protecting the devil. Where is the backup? Mike yelled into his comms. Endeavor? Hawks? Anyone? Tied up, Ectoplasm's voice crackled through the earwig. He was down at the gate level, creating dozens of clones to hold the steel doors shut from the inside. The broadcast was global, Mike. Every villain in this city came out of the woodwork. The police stations are under siege. The pro-hero agencies are burning. We are on our own. Crunch. A massive fissure appeared in the center of the main gate. A man with a gigantification quirk, swollen to the size of a small building, was using a street lamp as a battering ram. They're going to breach! Ectoplasm shouted. Fall back to the secondary line. Protect the students. Mike looked back toward the main campus, toward the dorms nestled in the distance. He thought of Class 1A. He thought of the terrified boy with green hair who had sat in his English class just that morning. Damn it! Mike unleashed a sonic scream, a focused beam of sound that shattered the giant's eardrums and sent him stumbling back into the crowd. Hold the line! If they get past us, those kids are dead. Heights Alliance, Class 1A dormitory. The atmosphere inside the dorms was a suffocating cocktail of dread and adrenaline. The lights had been cut to avoid drawing attention, leaving the common room illuminated only by the red strobe of the emergency backup lighting. Momo Jairose was a whirlwind of creation. Her lipids were burning fast as she produced thick steel plates, reinforced barricades, and cans of quirk-suppressing foam. Sato, Shoji, reinforced the north windows. She commanded, her voice trembling but authoritative. Mineta, Kaminari, lay the foam traps at the entrance. If they breach the door, I want them stuck before they take a step. We're trapped like rats, Mineta whimpered, his hands shaking as he sprayed the sticky foam across the entryway floor. Did you hear the news? They said dead or alive. They're going to kill us all just to get to him. Shut up, you grape-headed coward. Bakugo Katsuki was pacing the room like a caged tiger, small explosions popping incessantly in his palms. He wasn't helping with the barricades. He was watching the perimeter through a slit in the blinds. Nobody is dying today. If they come through that door, I'll blast them to hell. But even Bakugo's bravado felt thin. His eyes kept darting to the couch in the center of the room. Izuku Midoriya sat there, his head in his hands. He was vibrating. It wasn't fear, or rather, it wasn't just fear. It was danger sense. The fourth user's quirk was screaming in his skull, a constant, agonizing stab sensation that told him danger wasn't just coming, it was everywhere. It was the air he breathed. It was the ground beneath his feet. Deku. Uraraka knelt before him, placing her hands over his shaking ones. Her face was smudged with dirt, her eyes wide and wet. Breathe. You have to breathe. I can feel them, Izuku gasped, his voice ragged. Thousands of them. Malice. So much malice. It's so loud, Uraraka-san. It feels like my head is splitting open. Midoriya, Todoroki stepped forward, his right side encased in ice, ready for combat. We have a plan. We hold the dorms. The teachers are at the gate. The structural defenses of the campus are the best in the world. We just have to wait for the hysteria to die down. It won't die down, Izuku whispered, looking up. His green eyes were bloodshot, the pupils dilated. You saw the broadcast. 100 billion. One wish from all for one. They won't stop. They'll never stop. Then we fight until they do, Kirishima said, slamming his hardened fists together. We're heroes, man. We don't hand over our friends. Code Red. Jiro yelled from the corner. She had her jacks plugged into the wall, listening to the vibrations of the building's foundation. The sensors, they just died. What? Ida snapped his head around. The perimeter sensors? All of them, Jiro said, her face paling. The cameras, the motion detectors, the thermal, everything just went flatline. It wasn't an attack from the outside. The signal was cut from the inside. The room went deathly silent. A traitor, Ajri whispered. There's someone inside the barrier. Suddenly, the red emergency lights flickered and died, plunging the room into total darkness. Don't panic! Momo created a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. Form a defensive circle around Midoriya. Now! But before they could move, the sound of glass shattering echoed from the second floor. It wasn't the heavy crash of a mob. It was the precise, tactical breaking of a window. There inside, Tokoemi hissed, dark shadow expanding around him, fueled by the darkness. Upstairs, the second floor, the sabotage had been elegant. While the teachers were distracted by the brute force of the mob at the gates, the internal security grid had been disabled with a single, encrypted command code. On the roof of the dorms, 3 figures crouched in the shadows. Spinner adjusted his massive blade, his lizard-like scales bristling with nervous energy. You sure the sensors are down? If the bots catch us, trust the doctor, trust the plan. Twice jittered, holding his head. The sensors are dead. Long live the sensors. The traitor did their job. Good traitor. Bad traitor. Shut up, Jean, Toga Himiko giggled. She was practically vibrating with excitement. She held a combat knife in one hand and a syringe in the other. Her cheeks were flushed pink. Izuku is down there. I can smell him. He smells like sweat and fear and destiny. Remember the objective, Spinner grunted. We aren't here to fight 20 hero students. We create confusion. We grab the boy. We leave. If we get bogged down, we lose. Chaos. Twice spread his arms. I'm good at chaos. Sad man's parade. Twice began to duplicate. 2 became 4. 4 became 8. 8 became 16. Within seconds, the roof was swarming with clones of the black-suited villain. Go, Spinner commanded. They smashed through the skylight. The common room. The ceiling exploded. Debris rained down on Class 1A. Screams erupted as students scattered. Protection squad. Ida roared, revving his engines. Shield Midoriya. Dozens of figures in black bodysuits dropped from the hole in the ceiling, landing with synchronized thuds. It's the League! Ciro shouted, launching tape to bind the nearest attacker. But as soon as the tape wrapped around the villain, the figure dissolved into a gray sludge. Clones! Bakugo realized instantly. It's that multiplier freak! Blast them all! Bakugo launched himself into the air, unleashing a torrent of explosions. Boom! Boom! The shockwaves rattled the reinforced walls. Every clone he touched liquefied, but for every one he destroyed, 3 more seemed to drop from the darkness. It was a flood. A tidal wave of expendable bodies designed to separate the class. Todoroki! Momo screamed. Wall of ice. Divide the room! Todoroki didn't hesitate. He stomped his right foot, sending a massive glacier surging through the center of the common room. The ice wall slammed into the swarm of Twice clones, freezing them solid or crushing them against the far wall. But the ice also separated the class. On one side, Bakugo, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Jiro, fighting off the bulk of the clones. On the other, Izuku, Uraraka, Ida, and Azuri. And in the shadows of the separation, the real threats emerged. Izuku-kun! The voice was a sing-song nightmare. Toga Himiko dropped from the ceiling, bypassing the ice wall with acrobatic grace. She landed directly in front of Izuku, her knife flashing in the dim light. Izuku reacted on instinct. Danger sense had warned him a split second before she landed. He ducked, the blade slicing a lock of his green hair. Get away from him! Uraraka screamed. She lunged forward, her fingers pads ready to activate zero gravity. Toga twisted in midair, lashing out with a kick that caught Uraraka in the stomach, sending her crashing into the coffee table. Ochako! Izuku yelled, starting to move, green lightning crackling around his body. Don't look at her, look at me! Toga laughed, swiping her knife again. The world wants you, Izuku. They want to sell you. But I just want to be you. Isn't that romantic? Recipro burst. Ida appeared as a blur of motion. His kick caught Toga in the shoulder, snapping bone and sending her flying across the room. She hit the wall with a sickening crunch, but she was laughing as she slid down. Spinner! Toga coughed, spitting blood. Now! The lizard villain burst from the hallway leading to the kitchen. He wasn't aiming for Izuku. He was holding a massive, makeshift sword made of distinct metal shards bonded together. He swung the weapon, not at a student, but at the support pillar of the room. The pillar sheared in half. The dormitory groaned. The ceiling above them began to sag. "They're bringing the building down!" Azuri cried out, leaping to grab Mineta and drag him to safety. "Midoriya, run!" Ida shouted, positioning himself between Izuku and the villains. "Go to the emergency exit. We will hold them." Izuku took a step back. His heart was hammering so hard it hurt. He looked at Uraraka, who was struggling to stand, clutching her ribs. He looked at Ida, whose engines were stalling from overuse. He could hear Bakugo screaming in rage from the other side of the ice wall, the sound of explosions mixing with the terrifying wet thwack of twice clones multiplying. And then danger sense shifted. It wasn't just the room anymore. It was the ground. Rumble. The floor beneath them shook violently. "What now?" Ciro yelled. From the windows they saw it. The UA barrier hadn't just been breached. It had fallen. Through the gaps in the blinds, Izuku saw the floodlights of the campus illuminate the incoming tide. The mob had broken through the teachers' line. Thousands of people were sprinting across the lawns, trampling the flower beds, swarming toward the dorms like a colony of army ants. And among them were the heavy hitters. A massive blast of blue fire incinerated a patch of trees near the dorm entrance. "Dabi," Todoroki's voice came from behind the ice wall, strained and cold. "They're here," Izuku whispered. "Everyone is here." He realized then, with a clarity that was colder than Todoroki's ice, that Yui could not hold. Not against this. The teachers were overwhelmed. The defenses were sabotaged. His friends were fighting a losing battle against an infinite enemy. If he stayed, they would die. The math was simple. Cruel, but simple. "Ida-kun," Izuku said, his voice strangely calm amidst the chaos. Ida looked back, sweat pouring down his face inside his helmet. "Don't speak. Just get to the exit." "If I go to the exit," Izuku said, "they will follow. If I stay here, they will burn this building down with you inside." "We can protect you!" Uraraka cried out, finally standing up. "We promised." "You are protecting me," Izuku said, tears spilling from his eyes. "But who protects you?" He looked at his hand. He clenched it into a fist. He channeled one for all. Not the safe 20% he used for sparring. Not the controlled bursts. He pushed it. 30%. 40%. 45%. The air pressure in the room dropped. Green electricity arced violently off his skin, shattering the nearby windows. The floorboards beneath his feet began to splinter from the sheer force radiating off him. "Deku, what are you doing?" Bakugo's voice came through the ice wall, panicked. He knew that sound. He knew that power. "Don't you dare, you nerd! Don't you dare do it!" Izuku looked at Toga, who was pulling herself up, smiling maniacally. He looked at Spinner. He looked at the clones. "Tell All Might." Izuku choked back a sob. "Tell him I'm sorry." "Midoriya, no!" Ida reached out. Izuku bent his knees. Manchester smash. He didn't aim at a villain. He didn't aim at the wall. He aimed at the roof. Izuku launched himself upward with the force of a cannon shell. The air displaced by his jump hit the room like a bomb, knocking Ida, Uraraka, and the villains flat against the floor. Izuku tore through the ceiling of the common room. Then the second floor. Then the roof. He erupted from the top of the Heights Alliance building in a pillar of green lightning and debris, soaring high into the night sky. He was a beacon. A flare. "I'm here!" Izuku screamed, his voice amplified by the sheer force of his lungs and the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He floated there for a second, suspended by Nana Shimura's quirk, float, bathed in the moonlight and the spotlights of the helicopters that had just arrived. Below him, the battlefield froze. The mob running toward the dorms stopped. The villains fighting the teachers paused. Every eye turned upward. "It's him!" Someone screamed from the crowd. "It's the boy! There he is! Get him!" Izuku looked down at the school he loved. He saw the broken gates. He saw Aizawa fighting 3 mutants at once. He saw the smoke rising from the dorms where his friends were huddled. He made eye contact, or felt like he did, with Shigaraki Tamura, who was standing on a hill in the distance, watching. "Come and get me!" Izuku roared. He spun in the air, activating Black Whip. He latched onto a crane at a nearby construction site outside the campus, used the tension to slingshot himself, and rocketed away from Yue. High, heading deep into the urban sprawl of Muzurifu. The reaction was instantaneous. The mob turned. Like a single organism, the thousands of attackers abandoned the school. They ignored the teachers. They ignored the students. They turned and sprinted toward the city, chasing the green lightning. Inside the dorms, the dust was settling. Uraraka coughed, waving away the plaster dust. She looked up at the gaping hole in the roof, staring at the empty patch of night sky where Izuku had been. He left, she whispered, her voice breaking. Bakugo blasted through the ice wall, his eyes wild. He scanned the room. He saw the hole. He saw the villains retreating, chasing the prize. DKU! Bakugo screamed at the sky, a sound of pure, unadulterated frustration and fury. The streets of Muzurifu. Izuku landed hard on the roof of an office building, rolling to disperse the impact. He didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Danger sense was no longer stabbing him. It was a constant, blinding white noise. The entire city was hostile. He leaped to the next roof, his legs burning. He could hear the sirens. He could hear the helicopters. He could hear the roar of the mob shifting direction, flowing through the streets like lava. He checked his pockets. He had his phone cracked. He had his gloves torn. He had nothing else. No money. No food. No backup. He was 18 years old. He was the 9th holder of One for All, and he was the most wanted person on the planet. Izuku gritted his teeth, tears streaming horizontally across his face as he ran. I have to draw them away, he told himself. Far away. Into the industrial district. Away from the homes. Away from the school. A drone buzzed past his head, filming him. Target acquired. A digital voice spoke from the drone. Location broadcasting to the Bounty Network. Izuku smashed the drone with a backhand, sending it spiraling into the street below. He stopped for a split second, looking at the city skyline. It used to look like a playground for heroes. Now, every window looked like an eye. Every shadow looked like a cage. He was alone. Bring it on, Izuku whispered to the empty air. He activated full cowling again, the lightning illuminating the darkness, and leaped into the night. The fortress of Yue had survived the siege, but the war for Izuku Midoriya had just begun. The rain began at 2 a.m. It wasn't a cleansing rain. It was a cold, miserable drizzle that mixed with the soot of the burning city to create a slick, gray sludge on the rooftops of Muzurifu. Izuku Midoriya didn't feel the cold. He didn't feel the dampness seeping through the tattered remains of his gamma suit. He felt only the buzzing. It was a sensation inside his skull, located somewhere behind his eyes and deep in the base of his neck. Danger sense. The fourth user's quirk, usually a sharp, warning stab, had evolved into a constant, agonizing migraine. It was a white noise of malice that never turned off. It fluctuated in intensity. A sharp spike meant a sniper, a dull roar meant a mob, but it never went silent. Left. Duck. Izuku threw his upper body to the right, his feet skidding on the wet rooftop tiles. A line of red tracer fire zipped through the space his head had occupied a microsecond before. The sound of the gunshot followed a second later, a suppressed thwip from a high-rise balcony 3 blocks away. He didn't stop to look. He couldn't. Full cowling, 30%, he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. Green lightning, dimmer now than it had been hours ago, flickered around his limbs. He planted a foot on the edge of the roof and launched himself into the void between buildings. He was flying, or rather, falling with style, using Black Whip to snag a gargoyle on the adjacent cathedral. He swung through the air, the G-force pulling at his sore shoulders, and released at the apex of the arc to land on a water tower. He had been running for 6 hours. 6 hours since he left Yue High. 6 hours since he left his friends. 6 hours since he became the most valuable object on planet Earth. He paused for a heartbeat on the water tower, crouching low. His breath came in ragged, steaming puffs. He needed to orient himself. He was in the Naruhata district now, moving toward the industrial coastline. The density of residential buildings was lower there. Fewer people. Fewer eyes. He glanced down at the street below. It was a river of chaos. Even at this ungodly hour, the streets were alive. Cars were gridlocked, abandoned, or burning. People were everywhere. They weren't moving with the rhythm of a commute, they were hunting. Every person holding a smartphone was a potential scout. Every person with a quirk was a potential captor. A massive digital billboard on the side of a bank flickered. The ad for a new brand of coffee was replaced by the static-laced image of All for One. The offer stands, the voice crooned, echoing off the wet concrete. 100 billion. One wish. He is tired. He is alone. He is close. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. The psychological weight was heavier than the physical exhaustion. The man was toying with him. All for One wasn't just hunting him. He was narrating the hunt to the audience. I need water, Izuku thought, his throat feeling like sandpaper. I need 5 minutes to just sit down. Spike. The danger sense flared so hard Izuku gasped, clutching his head. Below him, the water tower groaned. Found you, little rabbit! The voice was mechanical, amplified. The metal legs of the water tower didn't buckle, they bent. They twisted like wet clay. The steel groaned in protest as the entire structure tilted violently to the left. Izuku reacted instantly. He leaped off the tower just as the metal support snapped inward, crushing the tank like a soda can. A massive deluge of water exploded outward, washing over the rooftop and pouring into the alley below. Izuku landed in a roll on the gravel roof, coming up in a defensive stance. Standing on the roof access door, illuminated by the flashing neon of a nearby hotel sign, was a man. He wore a long, dark red coat and a metal mask that covered the lower half of his face. His hands were pressed against the roof's ventilation unit. Wolfram. Izuku recognized him from the files. A villain who had once attacked Island. A man who could manipulate metal. A man who should have been in Tartarus. The jailbreak, Izuku whispered. You got out. We all got out, Wolfram laughed. His voice was rough, grating. He lifted a hand, and the fire escape of the adjacent building ripped itself from the brickwork, floating in the air like a massive, rusted serpent. The Demon Lord opened the cages, kid. And he promised the one who brings you in gets to rule a kingdom of their own. I'm not going with you, Izuku said, shifting his stance. He calculated the distance. 20 meters. Wolfram had the environmental advantage. The entire city was his weapon. You look tired, hero, Wolfram sneered. He clenched his fist. The floating fire escape disassembled instantly, the metal bars sharpening into hundreds of spears. Sleep! Wolfram thrust his hand forward. The metal rain descended. Part 2, the metal jungle. Izuku didn't retreat. He couldn't. Behind him was the edge of the roof and a drop into a crowded alley. If he dodged, the metal spears would rain down on the civilians below. Texas smash! Izuku punched the air. The wind pressure generated by 45% of 1 for all blasted outward, colliding with the metal spears. The force scattered them, sending the steel rods clattering harmlessly onto the roof or embedding them into the concrete walls of the higher buildings. But Wolfram was already moving. He slammed his palms onto the roof surface. The very ground beneath Izuku's feet rippled. The steel girders inside the concrete roof twisted. Danger sense. Below, Izuku jumped, activating float. A split second later, massive steel spikes erupted from the roof, piercing the spot where he had been standing. You can fly? Cute, Wolfram grunted. He reached out toward a construction crane towering over the block. Let's see you fly through this, the crane groaned. The massive wrecking ball attached to it swung wildly, defying gravity, and came hurtling toward Izuku. Izuku was mid-air, floating. He had no leverage. Think. Use his power against him. Izuku shot Black Whip out, not at the wrecking ball, but at the crane's arm itself. He yanked himself toward the crane, narrowly missing the wrecking ball as it whooshed past him, the wind buffeting his face. He landed on the crane arm, sprinting along the narrow metal beam toward Wolfram's position on the roof below. Get over here! Izuku yelled. You're coming to me? Good. Wolfram laughed. He gestured with both hands. Every TV antenna, every satellite dish, every loose screw on the rooftop rose into the air. It was a tornado of scrap metal, swirling around the villain. Magnetic storm. The scrap metal shot toward Izuku like a shotgun blast. Izuku gritted his teeth. Fa gene. Build up. Kinetic energy. Store it. Release it. He moved his legs in a blur, generating energy as he ran down the crane arm. Smoke screen. Purple smoke exploded from his body, enveloping the crane and the rooftop in a thick, blinding cloud. The scrap metal tore through the smoke, but Izuku was gone. Hiding? Wolfram scoffed. I can feel the metal on your boots, kid. I know exactly where you are. Wolfram clenched his fist, sensing the iron soles of Izuku's hero costume. He crushed the air. Crunch. The metal soles of Izuku's boots imploded, but Izuku wasn't in them. What? Wolfram blinked. Out of the purple smoke, a figure emerged barefoot. Izuku had kicked off his iron-soled boots the moment the smoke deployed. He was above Wolfram, falling silently. Black chain. The black tendrils of energy wrapped around Wolfram's torso, binding his arms to his sides. Detroit smash. Izuku didn't aim for the head, that would kill him. He aimed for the solar plexus. The fist connected. Boom. The impact cracked the roof. A shockwave cleared the rain for 50 meters. Wolfram's eyes bulged behind his mask. The air was forced from his lungs. The metal manipulator crumpled, the control over the surrounding steel vanishing instantly. The floating debris rained down with a deafening clatter. Izuku landed, panting heavily. His feet were bare, bleeding slightly from the gravel. He looked down at the unconscious villain. One down. Thousands to go. He knelt to check Wolfram's pulse. It was steady. Danger sense. Left. Right. Behind. It wasn't over. It was never over. From the stairwell door, 3 more figures burst out. Not villains this time. They were wearing business suits. They held handguns and baseball bats. There he is! One of them shouted, pointing a trembling finger. He knocked out the villain. Get him while he's tired. The money is ours. Izuku looked at them. They were terrified, but their greed was stronger than their fear. Please, Izuku said, raising his hands. Go home. It's dangerous. Shut up, monster! The man in the front fired his gun. The bullet pinged off the concrete near Izuku's foot. Izuku looked at the bullet hole. Then he looked at the man. The man was shaking, tears in his eyes. I have debts. The man screamed, firing again. I have nothing. You're worth everything. Izuku felt a crack in his heart. It wasn't the villains that hurt. It was this. All for One hadn't just unleashed the criminals. He had revealed the darkness in ordinary people. Izuku turned and ran. He leaped off the roof, swinging into the darkness, leaving the weeping man and the unconscious villain behind. Part 3. The Shadows of Hunger. 4:30 a.m. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hollow, gnawing ache in his stomach. He hadn't eaten since lunch the previous day. His metabolism, boosted by One for All, burned calories like a furnace. He was running on fumes. He found himself in the warehouse district near the docks. It was a maze of rusted shipping containers and dilapidated storage units. It smelled of salt and rotting fish, but it was quiet. Danger sense was a low hum here. Tolerable. Izuku limped into an alleyway between 2 warehouses. He found a spot behind a dumpster, sheltered from the wind and the prying eyes of the drones. He slid down the brick wall, sitting in a puddle of oily water. He didn't care. He pulled his knees to his chest. His costume was a wreck. The sleeves were torn, the gloves were frayed, and he was barefoot. His feet were cut and bruised from running on concrete without protection. He reached into one of his utility pouches. It was empty. He checked the other. A single, crushed energy bar. It was lemon-flavored. He hated lemon. He unwrapped it with trembling fingers and took a bite. It tasted like sawdust and chemicals, but to his starving body it was ambrosia. He ate it slowly, trying to make it last. I wonder if they're okay, he whispered to the empty alley. He thought of Uraraka's face when he left. The betrayal in her eyes. No, not betrayal. Fear. Fear for him. He thought of Ida trying to shield him. Bakugo screaming at him. I had to, he reassured himself. If I stayed, the dorms would be rubble. He closed his eyes for a second. Just a second. The vestige world flickered into view. The first user was there, standing amidst the smoke. You cannot rest, ninth. He is watching. The fourth user, Shinomori, appeared. The malice is closing in. You have to keep moving. I know, Izuku muttered in his sleep. I know. He jolted awake. He had dozed off for maybe 10 minutes. What woke him wasn't danger sense. It was a sound. A very human sound. A cough. Izuku stiffened, green lightning sparking instantly around his skin. He scanned the alley. 10 feet away, huddled under a pile of cardboard boxes, was a figure. Who's there? Izuku asked, his voice low and threatening. The cardboard shifted. A face peered out. It was a man. Older, maybe in his 50s. He wore a dirty coat and had a thick gray beard. He looked like he had been living on the streets long before All for One broke the world. The man looked at Izuku. He looked at the glowing green lightning. He didn't scream. He didn't reach for a phone. He just sighed and reached for a bottle of water sitting next to him. You're loud when you eat, the man rasped. Izuku blinked, the lightning fading slightly. I'm sorry. The man took a sip of water and wiped his mouth. You're the kid, aren't you? The one on the TV. The one worth all the money. Izuku tensed, ready to bolt. Yes, the man chuckled. It was a dry, hacking sound. Well, you picked a bad spot to hide. The rats here are size of cats. Are you going to turn me in? Izuku asked. The man looked at him. Really looked at him. He saw the torn clothes, the bleeding feet, the dark circles under the eyes. Kid, the man said, I've been invisible to this city for 10 years. Heroes didn't save me when I lost my job. Villains didn't help me when I lost my house. Why should I help them catch you? The man kicked a small, wrapped package toward Izuku. Convenience store threw it out. Expired yesterday. Still good though. Izuku hesitated. He reached out and picked it up. A ham sandwich. Why? Izuku asked. Because you look like you're about to fall over, the man grunted, pulling his cardboard back over his head. And because I hate the police. Eat up. Then get lost. Izuku stared at the sandwich. Tears welled up in his eyes again. For the first time in hours, someone wasn't trying to sell him or kill him. Thank you, Izuku whispered. He ate the sandwich. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. Part 4. The Serpent in the Grass. The respite lasted 20 minutes. Izuku felt slightly recharged. The food and the brief moment of humanity had settled his shaking hands. He stood up, bowing deeply to the sleeping man under the cardboard, and prepared to move. He needed new shoes. He needed to get to the extraction point he had mentally marked, a safe house All Might had set up in the next district. He moved toward the mouth of the alley. Danger sense. Hi! He froze. From the street, a scream echoed. Help! Please! Someone help! It was a woman's voice. High-pitched, terrified. Izuku's hero instincts, drilled into him for years, overrode his survival instincts. He didn't think, he moved. He sprinted out of the alley and onto the street. The scene was chaotic. A car had crashed into a storefront. Smoke was billowing from the hood. A woman was trapped inside, the door jammed against a concrete bollard, and looming over the car was a villain, a large man with spikes protruding from his shoulders. Get out of the car! The villain roared, ripping at the roof. Help! The woman screamed, seeing Izuku emerge from the shadows. He's going to kill me! Izuku didn't hesitate. Smash! He leaped, delivering a swift kick to the villain's jaw. The villain flew backward, crashing into a pile of trash bags. Izuku landed by the car door. He grabbed the handle. The metal was crumpled. Don't worry, Izuku said, giving her his best reassuring smile, though he knew he looked like a wreck. I'll get you out. He channeled power into his grip. The metal groaned and tore as he ripped the door off its hinges. The woman fell out, coughing, scrambling away from the burning vehicle. She was young, maybe 25, dressed in office wear. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. You! She breathed. You're him. Deku. You need to get to safety, Izuku said, offering her a hand to help her up. Run to the police station 3 blocks east. It's still fortified. The woman stared at his hand. Her hand was shaking. She reached out. Izuku felt a wave of relief. He had saved someone. Even now, he could be a hero. She took his hand, and then she smiled. It wasn't a smile of gratitude. It was a smile of sorrowful apology. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Danger Sense screamed. But it was too late. The woman didn't pull herself up. She pulled a taser from her pocket, a high-voltage, police-grade model, and jammed it into Izuku's exposed wrist. Zop! 50,000 volts surged through Izuku's body. His muscles locked up. His vision went white. The smell of burning ozone filled his nose. He collapsed to his knees, his nerves on fire. "I'm sorry!" The woman sobbed, backing away, still holding the taser. "My mother, she has cancer." The wish. He said he could grant a wish. Izuku lay on the asphalt, twitching. His body, durable as it was paralyzed by the electricity. He looked up at her. He saw the tears streaming down her face. She wasn't evil. She was desperate. She was a daughter who wanted to save her mother, and to do it, she had to sell him to the devil. "Don't move," she cried, pulling out her phone with her other hand. "I just have to call the number." "Please don't move." The villain Izuku had kicked, the one with the spikes, groaned and stood up. He shook his head. "Hey!" the villain shouted. "That's my bounty. I set up the crash. I caught him." The woman screamed back, aiming the taser at the villain now. "Back off. He's mine." Izuku watched them argue. The civilian and the villain. Fighting over him like a piece of meat. Something inside Izuku broke. It wasn't his bones. It wasn't his spirit. It was his naivety. He had believed that if he saved people, they would understand. He believed that heroism was a transaction, protection for trust. But all for one had changed the currency. The woman was dialing the number. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Izuku grit his teeth. He forced his seizing muscles to obey. Move. Move. One for all isn't just power. It's will. Green lightning erupted from his body, violent and erratic. The shockwave knocked the phone from the woman's hand. She gasped, stumbling back. Izuku stood up. He swayed. He looked at the woman. She cowered, covering her face. "Don't hurt me. Please!" Izuku looked at her. He could knock her out. He could tie her up. Instead, he just looked at her with eyes that were suddenly very old. "Go to your mother," Izuku said softly. He turned to the villain. The villain charged. "You're mine!" Izuku didn't dodge. He stepped in, grabbed the villain by the throat with Black Whip, and slammed him into the pavement with enough force to crack the foundation of the street. The villain went limp. Izuku stood alone in the street. The burning car illuminated his back. He didn't look at the woman again. He activated full cowling and leaped onto the nearest building. As he ran across the rooftops, the tears finally stopped. He didn't have the hydration to spare for them. He realized now the nature of the game. There were no civilians anymore. There were no bystanders. There were only hunters. And him. The night was far from over. And the predators were just getting started. "I can't trust anyone," Izuku thought, the mantra settling into his soul like cold iron. "Not the people I save. Not the people I know. I have to be a ghost." Ahead of him, the lights of the Meta Liberation Army's territory glowed in the distance. He ran toward them. Not to hide, but because he had nowhere else to go. The golden ticket was fraying at the edges, stained with blood and betrayal. And the world was closing in. Part 1. The Silence of the Lambs. The sun rose over the industrial district of Dagoba not with a burst of hope, but with a pale, sickly light that filtered through the smog. The early morning air tasted of sulfur, rust, and the lingering ozone of quark usage. Izuku Midoriya stopped moving for the first time in 2 hours. He crouched atop a massive, cylindrical cooling tower belonging to a defunct chemical plant. The height gave him a vantage point, but it also exposed him to the biting wind coming off the bay. He was trembling. Not from the cold, though his costume was shredded, exposing patches of bruised skin to the chill, but from the sheer metabolic crash. His body was eating itself. The caloric density of the sandwich he'd eaten hours ago had long since burned away, fueled into the furnace of one for all. But what disturbed him most wasn't the hunger. It was the silence. For the last 8 hours, the city had been a cacophony. Screams, sirens, explosions, the roar of the mob. It had been a zombie apocalypse of greed, with every civilian and petty thief trying to claim the bounty. Now, the streets below were empty. The mobs had vanished. The desperate civilians with tasers and kitchen knives were gone. The low-level thugs with mutation quirks and baseball bats were nowhere to be seen. It was as if the ocean had suddenly receded before a tsunami. Why? Izuku thought, his eyes scanning the maze of factories, warehouses, and shipping crates below. Did they give up? No. All for One's offer is still active. The screens are still broadcasting. He pressed a hand to his temple. The danger sense was doing something new. Before, it had been a constant, buzzing migraine, a swarm of angry bees representing thousands of small threats. Now, the buzzing had stopped. In its place was a deep, resonant throbbing. It was slower, heavier. It felt like the footsteps of a giant. Thump. 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 They cleared the board, Izuku whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. The small fry ran away because something bigger showed up. He stood up, his legs screaming in protest. He needed to keep moving. The industrial district was a labyrinth of steel and concrete, good for hiding, but also good for traps. He took a step toward the edge of the tower. Danger sense spike. It didn't come from a direction. It came from the temperature. The air around him didn't just get cold, it froze. Instantly. The moisture in the air crystallized into diamond dust. The steel plating of the cooling tower groaned as the metal contracted violently under the thermal shock. Izuku looked down at his feet. Frost was racing across the metal, moving faster than a running man. Jump! The voice of the fifth user, Daigoro Banjo, barked in his head. Izuku didn't question it. He activated full cowling, managing a sputtering 30%, and leaped backward into the empty air. A split second later, the cooling tower he had been standing on ceased to be a tower. A massive spike of ice, the size of a skyscraper, erupted from the ground at the tower's base. It speared upward, impaling the chemical silo and shattering it into a million frozen shrapnel shards. The sound was deafening, the screech of tearing metal and the boom of expanding ice. Izuku fell through the air, debris raining around him. He shot a black whip tendril out to catch a nearby crane, but the whip didn't connect with steel. It bounced off ice. He looked down. The entire district, 6 city blocks of factories and streets, was gone. In its place was a glacial landscape. Every building was coated in thick, jagged white. The roads were buried under glaciers. Standing atop the highest peak of the newly formed ice mountain, dressed in a thick parka that billowed in the unnatural wind, was a figure with long, pale hair. Giton, the ice user of the Meta Liberation Army, raised a hand. He didn't look angry. He looked focused. Professional. Target acquired. Giton's voice carried over the wind, amplified by the acoustics of the ice. The perimeter is sealed. The mouse is in the maze. Izuku swung wide, landing on the roof of a warehouse that was half swallowed by the glacier. He slid on the frost, his bare feet numb. The MLA, Izuku hissed, his breath misting. They treated this like a military operation. They scared the civilians away so they could turn the city into a kill box. He was no longer running from a mob. He was at war with an army. Part 2, The Glacial Cage. Midoriya Izuku. The voice boomed from everywhere at once. It wasn't Giton. It was deeper, more authoritative. It was coming from the drones hovering high above the ice layer. I am Redestro, the voice announced. You represent the shackles of the old society. The hoarding of power by the few. Your capture will fund the liberation of the many. Izuku ignored the speech. He was analyzing. Giton can manipulate ice. He can't create it from nothing, but he can control the temperature of water to create more. There's water everywhere here. The bay. The cooling tanks. The sewers. He has infinite ammo. A wall of ice, sharp as obsidian, rose from the roof to Izuku's left. He dodged right. Another wall rose. They were corralling him. You can't run, Giton said calmly. He stood 300 meters away, floating on a platform of ice. He flicked his wrist. 3 ice dragons, serpentine constructs with jaws of jagged frost, rose from the glacier. They lunged at Izuku with terrifying speed. Detroit smash! Izuku punched the air. The wind pressure shattered the head of the first dragon. But the ice simply reformed instantly, the shards flowing back together like water before hardening again. Physical attacks won't work. He just rebuilds them. The second dragon snapped at him. Izuku leaped, using float to hover briefly. St. Louis smash! He kicked the second dragon apart, spinning in midair to dodge the tail whip of the third. He was expending too much energy. Every smash drained his stamina. Giton, barely moving a muscle, was fresh. Is that all? Giton taunted. The power of one for all? It seems brittle. Giton clapped his hands together. The ice beneath Izuku exploded upward. It wasn't an attack, it was a cage. Massive pillars of ice shot up in a circle, curving inward to form a dome. Izuku looked up. The sky was disappearing. He's sealing me in, Izuku realized. If he closes that dome, he can crush me or freeze me to death. He had to break out. He needed speed. Third user. F.A. Gene. Build up the kinetic energy. Izuku began to bounce off the rising walls of the ice cage. Bam. 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 With every impact, he stored the energy, a reddish glow mixing with the green lightning. 1, 2, 3. The dome was 90% closed. Only a small hole of sunlight remained at the apex. Phantom menace. Izuku released the stored energy in a massive burst of speed. He became a blur, shooting straight up like a missile. He punched through the closing gap of the ice dome, shattering the apex and bursting into the open air. He was free, but he wasn't safe. As he hung in the air, momentarily weightless, danger sense screamed. Not from Giton, from above. Part 3, The Jailbreaker. Found you. The roar sounded like a jet engine taking off. Falling from the sky, having evidently leaped from a skyscraper miles away, was a mass of flesh and muscle fibers so dense it barely looked human. Muscular. The villain who had nearly killed Izuku at the forest training camp. The man who had pushed him to 1,000,000%. He should have been in Tartarus, but Tartarus was empty. Muscular didn't use a quirk to slow his fall. He aimed. Izuku twisted in midair, using Black Whip to yank himself sideways. Muscular missed him by inches. The villain slammed into the ice glacier below. Boom! The impact was catastrophic. It looked like a meteor strike. The meticulously crafted ice mountains of Giton shattered. A shockwave of dust and pulverized ice rippled outward for half a mile. Izuku landed on a jagged outcropping, shielding his face from the debris. From the crater, a hand emerged. It was the size of a torso, covered in layers of raw, red muscle fibers that writhed like living snakes. Muscular pulled himself out. He was bigger than before. His metal eye implant was gone, replaced by a gaping scar. His sanity seemed to have gone with it. He didn't look at Giton. He didn't look at the MLA drones. He looked only at Izuku. Midoriya! Muscular screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. I saw the TV. I saw the money. I don't care about the cash. I just wanted to find you. Muscular, Izuku breathed, his stance widening. His legs were shaking. You escaped. I was bored. Muscular laughed, flexing. His muscle fibers expanded, ripping his shirt to shreds. He grew in size, towering over the landscape. Prison was boring. The world is boring. But you gave me the best fight of my life. On the far side of the glacier, Giton looked annoyed. Go to a Masuji, Giton shouted. Interfere, and you will be eliminated. The MLA has claimed this target. Muscular turned his head slowly toward Giton. Shut up, Ice Cube, Muscular growled. He swung his arm. He wasn't even close to Giton, but the sheer air pressure from the swing acted like a cannon blast. A wave of force tore through the ice field, obliterating Giton's platform and sending the ice user tumbling into a snowbank. Muscular turned back to Izuku, grinning, a mouth full of jagged teeth. Round 2, little hero. Show me your power. Show me my blood. Part 4, The Unstoppable Object. Izuku didn't wait. He couldn't tank a hit from Muscular. Not in this state. His bones were already aching. His energy reserves were critically low. If he took a direct hit like he did in the forest, he wouldn't get up. Smoke. Izuku unleashed the 6th user's quirk. A thick cloud of purple smoke exploded, filling the battlefield. Hiding again? Muscular roared. He leaped into the smoke. I'll just smash everything until I hit you. Muscular began to thrash. He punched the ground, the air, the ice. Every hit created a localized earthquake. Izuku was moving through the smoke, guided by danger sense. He was faster than Muscular, but Muscular had stamina. I can't overpower him, Izuku analyzed rapidly as he ducked under a haymaker that decapitated a chimney. My 100% broke my arms last time. Even at 45%, I can't pierce his muscle armor. I have to be smart. I have to use his momentum. Muscular lunged, his fist aiming for where he thought Izuku was. Izuku used Black Whip. He wrapped the black tendrils around Muscular's ankle. Pull! Izuku yanked. He couldn't lift Muscular, but he could trip him. Muscular stumbled, his massive weight working against him. Float! F.A. Gene! Izuku shot upward, charging kinetic energy. He spun in the air, creating a centrifugal force. Wyoming smash! He drove his heel down onto the back of Muscular's head as the villain fell. Crack! It was a solid hit. Muscular's face smashed into the concrete below the ice. But before Izuku could retreat, a hand shot out. Muscular grabbed Izuku's leg. The grip was vice-like. Izuku felt the bones in his tibia creak. Gotcha, Muscular whispered from the ground. Let go! Izuku blasted Muscular's arm with an Air Force shot, but the muscle fibers just absorbed the impact. Muscular stood up, lifting Izuku like a ragdoll. He slammed Izuku into the ground. Wham! The world went white. Izuku tasted copper. His back screamed in agony. Weak! Muscular yelled, raising a fist the size of a boulder. You're holding back. Where is the 100%? Where is the power that broke the mountain? Get off! Izuku gritted his teeth. He focused one for all into his free leg. Not 45%, 100%, just for a split second. Just in the toe. He kicked Muscular in the chin. The impact was thunderous. Muscular's head snapped back, his grip loosening just enough. Izuku scrambled away, rolling on the ice. He tried to stand, but his right leg collapsed. He looked down. His ankle was swollen, turning a dark purple. The grab hadn't broken it, but it had crushed the soft tissue. He couldn't put weight on it. He's hurt. Redestro's voice boomed from the drones. Giton! Now! While he is immobilized, Giton, recovering from Muscular's attack, saw the opening. He raised both hands. Deep freeze. The water in the nearby bay surged. A tidal wave rose up, not of liquid, but of slush that was rapidly hardening. It loomed over the battlefield, ready to bury both Izuku and Muscular under million tons of ice. Izuku looked at the wave. He looked at Muscular, who was shaking off the concussion and grinning. He was trapped. An avalanche on one side, a monster on the other, and a broken leg anchoring him to the kill zone. He couldn't win. So don't try to win, a voice whispered. It was the second user. Survive. Change the battlefield. Izuku looked at the factory next to them. It was a massive, derelict structure. A steel mill. The supports had been damaged by Giton's ice and Muscular's rampage. If I can't run, Izuku muttered, green lightning sparking violently, then nobody runs. He wrapped his injured leg in Black Whip, creating a makeshift splint. He bit his lip until it bled to focus through the pain. Muscular! Izuku screamed. The villain looked at him. You want to see a smash? Yes. Muscular opened his arms wide. Izuku didn't aim at Muscular. He aimed at the foundational pillar of the steel mill behind the villain. He charged F.A. Gene. He pulled on every ounce of power he had left. One for all. 100%. The air shrieked. Texas smash. The wind pressure didn't just hit the pillar. It erased it. The blast tore through the bottom floor of the massive factory. Gravity took over. The 10-story steel mill groaned. It tipped. It didn't fall away from them. It fell on top of them. What? Giton paused, his ice wave hesitating. The building came down. Thousands of tons of steel, concrete, and heavy machinery collapsed onto the battlefield. Muscular looked up, his eyes widening. Oh, that's heavy. The building crushed him. It crashed into the ice wave, shattering the glacier. And it came down on Izuku. Part 5, Beneath the Ruins. Darkness, dust, silence. Izuku coughed, the sound wet and ragged. He was alive. Barely. He was in a pocket of space. Above him, a massive steel I-beam was held up by. He looked up. Black whip. In the split second before the collapse, his quirk had lashed out instinctively, creating a web of black energy that caught the falling debris, creating a tiny tent of safety. His arms were shaking. The strain was immense. Move, he told himself. You have to move before the whip gives out. He dragged himself forward. His right leg was useless, dragging behind him like dead weight. He clawed at the rubble, squeezing through gaps in the twisted metal. He could hear roaring somewhere deep in the pile. Muscular was alive. He was digging his way out, but Muscular was buried deep. Izuku was near the edge. He saw light. A sliver of morning sun. He pushed a slab of concrete aside and pulled himself out of the ruins. He was covered in gray dust. He looked like a ghost. Blood ran down his forehead, blinding his left eye. He looked back at the wreckage. The steel mill was a mountain of scrap. The ice lay shattered around it. Giton was nowhere to be seen, likely retreating or buried. Muscular was screaming in rage from beneath the earth. Izuku didn't celebrate. He didn't stop. He grabbed a piece of rebar lying on the ground. He bent it with his bare hands, shaping it into a crutch. He jammed the crutch under his arm. Step. Drag. Step. Drag. He moved away from the industrial district. He moved toward the dense urban center. The pain was blinding. His exhaustion was absolute. But the danger sense was still active. It wasn't buzzing anymore. It wasn't throbbing. It was silent again. But it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of being watched by a scope. High above, on a water tower 3 miles away, a woman with purple and pink hair adjusted the dial on her rifle. Her right arm transformed into a biomechanical barrel. Lady Nagant peered through her scope. She saw the boy limping through the dust. She saw the blood. She saw the determination. He's durable, she said into her comms. I'll give him that. Bring him in, Nagant. All for One's voice whispered in her ear. Don't kill him. Just remove his hope. Understood. Nagant lined up the shot. Not for the head. For the good leg. Bang. The bullet tore through the air. Izuku felt the danger sense spike, sharp, needle-like. He threw himself forward. The bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing a fresh line of red across his skin. He scrambled behind a wall, breathing hard. Sniper, he whispered. A pro. He looked at his leg. He looked at the sky. The brute force hadn't worked. So now, AFO was sending the assassin. Izuku closed his eyes for a second, gathering his will. I can do this, he lied to himself. He stood up on his rebar crutch. The hunt wasn't over. It was just changing range.